This is Boise Climate and Energy Programs with Steve Hubble. So I will let him take it away.
Thank you, Michaela. Thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. I'm really glad to have the time together with you to share some information about our climate and energy programs. I hope that we'll have plenty of time, and it looks so far that we do have a small group. So please feel free to jump in or prompt me in the chat if you have any questions as we go through the presentation this afternoon. I'll admit you may have heard me say I'm more of a Teams guy than a Zoom guy, so I'm learning here along with you. But look forward to getting through this and hope for a good discussion at the end. So with that, I'll share my screen here. And hopefully everybody can see that there. But again, thanks for joining us this afternoon. As Michaela shared, I'm Steve Hubble. I'm the Climate Action Manager for the City of Boise. And within my team is a small newly formed team of a group of 4 staff who work on climate, energy, sustainability, and air quality issues within the Public Works Department. And I'm going to start today with a little bit of climate intro, and then shift to energy, and then bring it back around to climate for discussion. Any National Geographic readers out there? Of course, I can't see your faces because the screen is shared, but as I got the honor earlier this summer to be appointed to Climate Action Manager, it reminded me of this National Geographic from, I think, 1988. So I was 11 years old. We got National Geographic every month, and I was big into maps and enjoyed reading them. And of course, I really liked this one at age 10 because it had this cool holographic cover. But within the magazine were several articles on some of the changes that were happening to the planet and how we needed to deal with them. And I do look back as one of those inspirations of youth for guiding me to working in the environmental field throughout my career in local government, and just thought it was a fun anecdotal moment to share as we got started. And so, as many of you are aware, the city's no stranger to working on climate-related topics. And, you know, some of them are so intrinsic to our operations when we think about recycling and composting, or energy, or our water work. You almost don't think about them in the framework of the climate discussion. So we are working in many of these areas, whether it be Boise's Energy Future, whether it be our open space work, our transportation action planning, and all of our other initiatives for many years towards ultimately actions that build and address climate change and climate action. But as many of you are also aware, we really haven't talked about them openly in that framework and with that border around it. So we're going to get to do that today. I want to spend the first few minutes talking about energy. So as many of you are aware, the city worked on Boise's Energy Future back in 2019, and want to just intro that and go through some details there. So we'll start with this video, and I hope the sound doesn't really go awry.
Cool. We're just going to chit chat about energy.
Okay. How much of it do I have?
For real. Yeah. No wrong answers, just that.
Putting me on the spot. The first word that comes to mind is coffee.
Yeah.
But I know that's probably not what you're looking for.
Mainly electricity, I would say.
Oh, well, you think of gasoline, of course.
Power.
I think of the sun.
I think I'm a person of a lot of energy.
Energy. What makes our systems run?
Basically stuff that allows us to live our daily life now. So heating our homes, even driving cars, all that is all energy, yeah.
I mean, you're probably pumping some serious energy out of this guy.
Those are big fat tires.
Yeah.
And so that was make sure I can get to the next slide here. Was a fun way to kick off some of our outreach work back in 2019 when we worked on Boise's energy future. And, you know, as you can tell by the conversation in the video, the topic of energy is really big. It's hard to know where to start, right? So we thought that would be a fun way to kind of solicit some random folks on the street and get their take. But when we talk about Boise's energy future and the work that I'll go through in the next few slides, we're really talking about energy that we use in the built environment. And in our community, we primarily source that from 3 places. So electricity, natural gas, and geothermal. And when we standardize how we measure those different sources into a metric, you see the chart on the left-hand side that shows the energy output of each of those. So how much are we using of each one to, for example, with electricity to light and power our homes, with natural gas for things like heating, hot water, stoves, gas appliances, and then particularly to Boise, geothermal. So while that 2% looks low, in most other communities, that number is 0. So we're really proud of our downtown geothermal system, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in just a second. And as we move through the next couple of slides, want to just differentiate between electricity and then our thermal energy sources, because I'll talk through them a bit separately as I frame up how we work through Boise's energy future. So first, our electricity. As many of you are aware, Idaho Power is our electricity provider, and they generate electricity from a number of different sources. Hydroelectric, renewable energy projects, and then traditional fossil fuels like coal, natural gas, and diesel. And also renewable energy that they import non-renewable energy that they import from generation in other parts of the country through transmission lines. And of course, our goal in Boise's energy future is to increase those clean and renewable sources that you see on the left-hand side of the screen there, moving out of the non-renewable categories in the middle. And over to the right, just some exciting tidbits. So our average annual hydroelectric generation is around 42%. That's pretty high nationally, so really gives us a good head start in carbon-free energy compared to most other or some other parts of the country. And then another notable stat is the 9% reduction in coal generation from 2014 to 2017. So that is certainly a trend that we like to see moving away from coal generation. Before I jump into the thermal sources, so I can't see the chat right now. I just want to check and see if anybody has any questions so far. Feel free to speak up. Okay, hearing none, I'll keep going. So again, we touched a little bit on our thermal sources, but primarily natural gas. So that's used for space and hot water heating, cooking. There's service lines throughout Boise. Currently, natural gas is a non-renewable source of energy because it's primarily sourced from extracted natural gas. And we're provided our natural gas by a utility, Intermountain Gas. And then for geothermal, there's 4 systems primarily located in a close adjacency to downtown Boise. It is a renewable resource as we're pumping hot water from the ground and using it to heat buildings, hot water, even some sidewalk snow melt applications, which is a really cool technology that it's being used for. And then I just wanted to show this graphic to touch on our geothermal resource a little more. So it's a closed loop process. We use very minimal electricity to pump water out of and then back into the ground. But if you're not familiar, there's a series of geothermal wells over behind Fort Boise in the park there, Military Reserve. We pump hot water that's around 180 degrees out of the ground, and then it runs through the city in and out of buildings. In buildings, heat is collected from the hot water and is used to power various systems, as I mentioned. And then the spent water is collected and then ultimately pumped back into the ground over in a tiny little well house at Julia Davis Park that you might not even know what it was. You may have walked by it a number of times, but that's a quick overview of how the system works. The aquifer at this point is self-replenishing and is in good condition. So currently the city heats about 600,000 square feet of downtown buildings, primarily commercial customers there, and the university is a big customer. And then also the three other systems that I mentioned have their own customers and buildings that they provide service to. And so as we went through Boise's energy future, we took a look at community input from various options. And with the folks we polled in a statistically relevant survey that we did in cooperation with Boise State, we generally found a broad sense of support and agreement with the city's efforts to transition to renewable energy, or to reduce energy use and transition to clean and renewable energy. And then we also saw pretty clear top priorities for the community. They supported clean and renewable energy, but also held a strong preference for affordability also. So that was something that we had to take in mind as we planned our goals and actions with Boise's energy future. So with that work, we landed at goals for both electricity and thermal energy. City Council approved these back in April of 2019. For our community, 100% clean electricity by 2035 with affordability and access for all. And then 100% clean electricity by 2030 for municipal operations, giving our city government a faster timeline and an opportunity to lead by example. And then with thermal energy, because some of the challenges in transitioning natural gas as compared to electricity, we took a more qualitative approach to focus on the actions that were available. And we'll touch on how we might work to develop quantitative goals in just a second. So with electricity, we developed a very detailed plan of how we would get to our 2035 goal using current electricity from our utility, supporting new renewable electricity generation from Idaho Power, also efficiency, a big part of our plan, and then some of the smaller components like green power program, on-site community renewable electricity. These would be things like rooftop solar installations, and then looking at opportunities to purchase renewable energy for our own facilities, and again, demonstrate that leadership by example. We were also encouraged during our process to know that Idaho Power also adopted their own clean electricity goal by 2045. Certainly different timeframes there, but we're encouraged by their commitment and look forward to opportunities to work together. And then with our thermal goal, focusing on efficiency again, our geothermal system. Renewable natural gas is kind of an emerging technology in that space, and that uses products that have been utilized previously, like landfill gas, byproducts from agricultural operations, from wastewater treatment to produce a renewed natural gas product. And then the last one there is renewable energy sourcing. So essentially what that means would be looking at opportunities to transition to electricity or other sources of energy that would be renewable as we move into the future. And then insert funny dog or pet meme for levity and a break, but what's next in energy? So more work on our thermal energy goals. When City Council approved Boise's energy future, they asked us to set quantitative goals for thermal energy. So we'll be working on that into 2021 and hope to come back with more information there and more details. We're also very active working regulatory activities with the Idaho Public Utilities Commission, ensuring that programs and policies that come through from utilities support our efficiency and clean energy goals. And then we've been doing what we can to communicate about the importance of efficiency and the availability of utility efficiency programs for customers throughout the community. I'm going to stop sharing there for a second and just pause and see if anybody has any questions about our electricity goals, Boise's energy future, before I move in to the climate discussion. I don't see anything in the chat, but feel free to jump on or ask any questions that you might have. And I'll try to enable chat for the other folks that joined since I shared the screen. Okay, last chance for any questions in the chat before we jump into the climate discussion. Okay. So Boise, as I mentioned earlier, we've quietly been working behind the scenes for many years on various actions that all support climate action. But one of the initial checks into working on that specifically was back in 2016 when we did a climate adaptation assessment. As many of you are aware, there's lots of globals or national models that suggest what might happen or what will happen with climate change. And we thought it was important to understand what some of our very specific local impacts would be. So we worked with the University of Idaho, Dr. John Abatsoglu, who at that time was with U of I and significant expertise in climate modeling. And what he did was run a number of different climate models for our region and determine what the top 8 climate impacts might be. And you can see those here with heat stress, drought frequency, air quality, many related to water, which of course in the Public Works Department, since we do provide the city's water renewal services, those issues are particularly important to us as we think about that. So the summary of the adaptation assessment is online and can be viewed if anybody's interested there. And then as we think about that, we also try to relate back to things that are happening or have happened currently. You know, we think about climate models and things that are 40, 50, 60 years into the future. They're sometimes pretty abstract, but what we did here was run an analysis of average annual high and low temperature at the Boise airport from 1940 to 2017. And it was pretty interesting to see. And as you look on the left in the graph, you want to check the dotted line, the black dotted line. That's kind of the key point. But you can see that rising trend in the average annual high and low temperature. I think it was particularly interesting to see the change of 3.3 degrees over that time in the average annual low, particularly when you think about winter temperatures and winter precipitation and how much snow melt and those things in our rainy season impact our water resources drought and all the work associated with that. And then another area where we've done a lot of data work historically, but haven't had a great chance to publicize it, is our work to develop greenhouse gas emissions inventories. So cities and corporate entities across the country and around the world do this to measure impact of emissions on their communities or with their businesses. And we have actually been doing these as far back as 2000 on an every 5-year basis for both our community and then for our government, so our individual facilities here. And we'll start to move into a pace of updating those more frequently. So on the next slide, I'll share our work in 2015 and in 2018, and we're currently developing our 2019 inventory, so we get these on an annual pace going forward. And just for reference, we use ICLEI, which is a national organization that many cities around the world use their protocols to account and report their greenhouse gas emissions. So this first is our city government emissions inventory, and you can see on the left is 2015 and on the right is 2018. So I think first thing to point out is the elements of the inventory. So on the top left in yellow, water renewal, and the top right, buildings and facilities. Those emissions are primarily the natural gas and electricity that we use to operate all of our facilities, like our water renewal facilities, our airport, our buildings like City Hall, parks, so on and so forth. Additionally, as you get into the smaller categories, the vehicle fleet, that's the petroleum and gasoline that we use to operate city vehicles. Street lights is the electricity that powers those. Solid waste is the trash that we generate at city facilities. And employee commute are the emissions associated to how our employees travel to work. We're excited to see a downward trend from 2015 to 2018, about 18% down. And some of that certainly due to some of the work that we mentioned in prior slides with city initiatives and efficiency, renewables, electric vehicles, but certainly can't take all the credit. Some of the emissions reduction is due to the changing nature of our electricity generation and less coal from our partners at Idaho Power. So we're excited to share in those benefits. And then as we move to the next slide, this is that same or a similar inventory scaled up to the community level. So this covers all of the citizens and our residents, businesses, activities in Boise, and smaller categories, but similar approach. So the yellow and the blue on the bottom and right-hand side of the donut there, that is our energy primarily that we use in the built environment. So again, natural gas and electricity primarily used by residences, businesses, industry. And then the orange or red there on the top half is our emissions from transportation. And that's made up primarily from on-road vehicles, off-road vehicles, and then air travel. And then as you can see from 2015 to 2018, we did increase emissions about 3%. So certainly not heading in the direction that we'd like to be. And I think underscoring the need for the discussion here in just a minute about intentional climate action. And let me just pause real quick and see if anyone has any questions on greenhouse gas inventories or the last couple slides. Okay, hearing none. As many of you may be aware, Michaela has her hand up. Let me see here. Go ahead, Michaela.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know if you can see the questions that are on Whova, but a couple of people ask you questions on Whova. Did you want me to read you those or?
Oh, that would be fantastic, Michaela. Thank you. I am not seeing those right at the moment.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I think most of your attendees are on Huva, but so one of the first questions was from Emily, and it's what are current steps to lower the temperature of the Boise River?
Sure, that's a great question. So with Public Works, we have a big staff here who works on water renewal issues, and temperature is a pollutant of concern in the Boise River that we think about with our discharge efforts from our water renewal or our wastewater treatment facilities. We've been looking a lot for solutions around natural systems. So where we can, doing things to increase shade or improve river habitat, activate historical side channels, which were areas where water used to flow when the river was more natural before human impact came to it. And there's certainly a lot more detail there. And Wendy, I'll share my email at the end of this. Please pass along your contact information, and I can connect you with staff who can probably provide many more additional details than I can right now.
Okay, so that's a great answer. Thank you. Our next one was what are natural and renewable sources of natural gas?
Thanks. That's a great question. So natural gas, I think it's important to remember, is methane. So that is gas that's extracted from the earth, similar to oil or petroleum, and is used in our environment. But while it does have lower emissions than coal as a fossil fuel, because it's methane, when that gas escapes through fracking or transmission or ultimately end use, it can be a problematic gas. So I touched a little bit on renewable natural gas. That is sort of the one potentially non-direct fossil fuel alternative that is a possibility in that space. But otherwise, there aren't any readily available clean alternatives that can sort of directly replace natural gas in its current form. So what we think about a lot when we look at replacing natural gas is electrification, which I'll talk about when we get back to the slides here. But essentially, for example, replacing uses with electricity where we currently use natural gas, because we know we have a plan and a program to transition our community to clean electricity. So understanding in the future, if we can do that, we would be powering those sources that formerly used natural gas with clean electricity.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have one more, and you might be covering this later, so feel free to just cover this in your PowerPoint, but reasons that the transportation emissions raise so significantly in a short period of time and solutions for addressing that area.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll touch on the first part and then let me come back to the second part with the slides. So within that 3-year period, so the transportation emissions are attributed to, I'll touch on 2, but on-road vehicles and air travel. So there was a significant amount of increased air travel into BOI from 2015 to 2018. So that's one part of the increase. The other part of the increase is from additional vehicle miles traveled from on-road vehicles. And then finally, while the percent increase between 2015 and 2018 is different, the raw increases are not as significant, but that graph is a little deceiving. Primarily, the broad increase in transportation is more of a factor of the emissions associated with buildings going down. So I'll touch on some of the transportation alternatives in just a minute, but I've just got a couple more slides. Let me go ahead and finish up, and then we can open it up to discussion or more questions.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So Mayor McLean announced the formation of a climate action division in July. And obviously climate action is a big priority of hers. So we're really excited to kind of bring our team together and bring this work out into the open and really begin to make good and transparent progress as we move forward. So our roles going forward are to coordinate with city departments and the community on climate action, develop and frame climate action policies for the mayor and city council, to develop and implement a climate action roadmap, which we'll talk about in just a minute, and then to track climate data like the greenhouse gas emissions inventory and metrics to assess progress. Additionally, we'll help support our internal departments and our community with expertise around the areas that we work in actively, like air quality, climate, and energy. And then, so as we started the discussion, we talked about many of the areas that we've been active in, whether it be energy, waste, water, open space, etc. Our climate action roadmap, which we're working on currently, will help us to bring our work together and focus on mitigation. So areas where we have opportunity to reduce emissions, like in our energy usage, and then adaptation and resilience. So ways that we can make our programs, our infrastructure, and our community more able and prepared to withstand potential impacts from climate change. With this roadmap, we'll identify specific goals and actions for our community, similar to what you saw in Boise's Energy Future. We'll also build on our newly established goal for city government to be carbon neutral by 2035. Additionally, we'll bring forward equity as the foundation of this roadmap so we can attempt to benefit those residents and folks in our community who may have the highest likelihood to be directly impacted by the negative implications of climate change. And then additionally, understanding that while city government does have an important role in our systems and our facilities, that ultimately the success of this program really will be made by the community at large and the work that they do. We use a roadmap as a vehicle to engage and promote community action. This will jump back to the question about how we address transportation electrification. So certainly for on-road vehicles, electric vehicles are an important part of how we move forward in that space. And certainly there's a lot of work in the pilot type phase. So we're currently working with our our trash provider, Republic Services, to integrate 10 electric trucks into their fleet during 2021 and shortly thereafter. So that's something that we're excited about. The city has done work with electric vehicles in our own fleet, but there's been specific budget allocated to that going forward. So we're excited to see that increase as we go forward. And then addressing the question about natural gas, we've been moving forward with some all electric buildings. So that we're currently building a police micro district downtown and had an opportunity to look at all electric there. And that will certainly be something that we continue to look at going forward, whether for remodels or new buildings. And then in addition to that, working on some priority initiatives in the near term, doing some baseline work around environmental justice, equity, and community health. And that'll tie some of the discussion around equity and the climate action. But again, understanding where we have some of these issues in our community to better enable us to target programs to benefit our frontline communities. And then many of you might have heard State of the City or the mayor talk otherwise. Certainly, she believes Boise to be a home for innovation in the climate and clean tech and clean energy economy. So we'll be working in that space to have the city support those industries, whether locally or those who hopefully might want to move here to help us with our local needs and solutions, or potentially scale up to those who might have national or global benefit. And ultimately, to use the umbrella analogy, we hope the climate division will help provide that umbrella focus of climate and climate action across the city and across the community. And then finally, I wanted to touch quickly on how you can help, and perhaps a snowflake is an odd analogy for this slide without any text, but the simile or the metaphor here, I guess, to use my term properly, is that I think for all of us, climate action looks a little different, just like a snowflake is unique. And I think it's often easy to get frustrated when you think about doing things to address climate change or to take climate action, because often it seems like it's this sort of all or nothing approach. And I think I just want to share that all of us doing something has a lot of power. So I would encourage you, whatever it is in your daily life, certainly with the energy space, we have some recommendations there, whether it be energy efficiency or renewable energy, things that you can do there to take action. And certainly there's actions that can be taken in the broader sense that help to address climate on a global or national stage, and anticipate to think about that. And maybe with diving into those, I'll pause and hopefully we have a few minutes to get into some of that discussion. My contacts information is here, and I believe also on the app, or if you Google Boise Climate Action, you can get to an email that will bring those inquiry to me. And from there, Michaela, I'm hoping you can help me with any more Hoover questions if those are there. I don't see any in the Zoom chat, or we can just open it up to discussion.
Yeah, we have a few questions for you. So Emily asked, is the state providing support or funding for any of these initiatives?
That's a great question, Emily. Certainly, currently we're operating most of the initiatives that we've discussed either within the city budget or with partners. There is an effort under the work of the University of Idaho McClure Center. It's called the Idaho Economic and Climate Impacts Assessment. And I think that will be an interesting look at a much broader scale of how climate action and climate impacts might affect the state, and significant interests within the state. So we're certainly watching for that to come out next year, and look forward to the information that it will provide, and potentially for the discussion and hopefully action that it will spark.
Okay, thank you. So another question that we have: sustainable food systems in Boise, and how does the city support those goals?
That's a great question. That's an emerging issue that we see in a lot of our climate action planning work when we look to some of our peer cities. Certainly there's been some initial work with our parks and open space folks, Bugs, the Boise Urban Garden School, our work at Spalding Ranch to get a more permanent facility and have a park type facility that stresses those type of issues around local food production. And then within our near and dear public works, which many folks aren't aware of, the city operates a farm called the 20 Mile South Farm, where we land apply our biosolids, which is a leftover product from the water renewal treatment facility. And we actually grow a significant amount of crops there. Many of those used as animal feeds, but some grains do go in to the food system. So we're certainly looking within that category to kind of build on that initial work and that pilot work to address that important issue more holistically, and also figure out what role the community plays, and existing community efforts support that.
Okay, that's That's great. Thank you for that information. Another question we had was, Boise businesses seem environmentally friendly. How are city businesses responding, and if negatively, in what way?
That's a no question, at least with the climate space. I'm not sure we have a full answer to yet, but I think if you go back to some of our work with waste reduction last year, we did a business challenge where companies kind of submitted what the work they were doing around recycling or materials use reduction. And I know we got good positive interest there. We have several businesses that participate locally in Idaho Power's green power program. So they offset their electricity use with green power purchase every month, and they pay a little extra to do that. So I think that's notable. And, certainly coming to Boise, being relatively new just 5 years ago, I mean, I certainly appreciate the stewardship here that both the residents and business community shows that certainly, unfortunately, it is a bit significantly more noticeable than where I relocated from. And I think to come, more engagement on the climate issue. So we'll see what comes next there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's encouraging to hear that Boise's doing what they can to be more green, especially with their businesses. So I think we only had one more question in the chat, and that was, how are you connecting with other city departments to implement sustainable initiatives citywide?
We will be likely, understandably, the climate division was just formed in the last couple of months. So we're getting started, but we anticipate, first of all, connecting with leadership in all the city departments, using the climate action roadmap to highlight work that they're doing that is already going on that benefits climate action. Also identifying near-term projects that we might be able to highlight there. And then I think, one exercise that we've gone through is, for example, you might think, how does the police department commit to climate action, or how do other non-traditional or internal departments support that? And we actually, in pretty short order, made a pretty good list of how ultimately all of our departments have a role. For example, you might not think arts and history do, but if we can get public art out there that inspires climate action or inspires sustainability or conservation, that's certainly an important contribution there. And there's examples all throughout across the city's 13 departments. So I think that's one first step. And I also anticipate a second step will probably be to form an internal working group to keep this message going. So departments can support the climate division, but also so that we can support them as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Right now, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. So I think you might be good unless there's anything else that you would like to add.
I just thank everybody for their time today. Certainly, if anyone has any follow-up questions or more detailed information that they need, please feel free to contact me offline, shubble@cityofboise.org, and keep your eyes and ears open for updates on our climate action roadmap and our other initiatives as we continue to work through those in the near term. Certainly, public engagement will be a significant part of that work. And thank you very much for your interest in the topic, and enjoy the rest of the Neighborhood Interactive.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, Steve. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks, everyone.